how Sudanese security forces tear gas at protesters in several cities, and thousands of people joining a call for 2 days of civil disobedience and strike action. African Analyst Advocate Sipho Mantula joins me now to talk about this. Advocate, good evening and thank you very much for your time joining us tonight on In Focus. The mediation attempts so far not yielding the results, or at least producing any results. Are you surprised at all, and what do you think is not going right as far as those mediation talks are going on currently?
Yeah, even in Thabo, and even to the viewers, Jumbo Africa, Thabo, I'm not shocked or even surprised, as you are aware, that 2 years ago, when this revolution was led by two great women, one of them being Salah, one of the youngest women at the age of 22, and the Sudanese academics and the workers, and many people who were thirsty for freedom, democracy under the rule of Omar al-Bashir. But when we are talking of mediation, talks, the grouping are not willing to engage with the military, because I would remember this was the moment of this month where the Transitional Council was supposed to hand over power to the civilian rule, and hence the issue of the military transitional council was just, one can say, a short temporary convenience move that was done after that moment. And one of your insights talking about the mediation and the role of IGAD, the AU, one will assume that the AU has already been engaged on Sudan. IGAD has been engaged, but one will recall that the role of the Middle East, the role of the Arab League, have been on the side of the current general, who is not even willing to listen to the AU, despite that the AU have already taken a move against Sudan. So, Thabo, one can say that what is happening in Sudan for this weekend and for the coming days, it will be a heated confrontation between the citizens and the military. Yeah,
this is a group that asked former leader there, Omar al-Bashir, the Sudan's ambassador to the United States, saying that this particular coup cannot continue with the degree of mobilization that is happening right now in the country. They are going to, and the ones that they're going to see in the next few days. Do you think the anti-protesters will be successful yet again here?
They will, Thabo, because one will look at the power of the women, what they used to call the Nubian women, the Kandaka women. I was looking at the 25 cabinet minister. Remember one of the ministers who was Minister of Foreign Affairs? One of the women who was saying that actually post-2019, there was no power that was given even for women to take part in these talks. So one can look at the pressure of women, the pressure of the workers. They will be able to put more pressure, despite what I can tell you now, that there is what one can say a high tension of arrest of the civil society members by the military and the police across Sudan. There is an internet blackout that has been led by the government, meaning even as the media from this side will be struggling to get news from Khartoum, as since last month they've been internet shut down, and which is again another challenge in terms of what does the AU say of access to information, freedom of engagement that should be there. So one can look at that beyond USA. It is important for IGAD, it is important for the AU to can mount pressure on the Sudanese government to can respect the AU resolution that has come out last week about the release, about going back to the civilian rule. Because what is critical here, Thabo, it is the issue of taking power back to the civilian rule, despite that they have their electoral calendar, which is 2023.
So, I mean, that's exactly what the protesters are calling for. In fact, they're calling for the complete dissolution of the power-sharing agreement that was signed in 2019 between the army and the civilian leaders. And they want the army to return to the barracks and have no role whatsoever in the governing of the country and in its politics. Is that the cause that they should take to rectify the situation?
Correctly, Thabo, but one thing that we should understand is that even within the Sovereign Council, within Transitional Council, there were some fractions, there were some factions within the party. If you can look at what General Abdel Burhan did say, in September there was an attempt of the coup, if you can recall, if viewers can rewind their minds a bit. Around September, there was an attempted coup, by the way. So this second one that has came through was again, Buran claiming that he was trying to protect this power mongering that was coming from the civil society members who were within the council. But if we look back, if the issue of power sharing agreements, they are bound to be reviewed. They are bound to be aligned to the current situation. Remember that Sudan has been going through economic challenges. Without this issue of the price of bread, there was the issue of sanctions that was waged against Sudan. The then Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok was pursuing IMF for more funds in the EU, and those funds have been freezed after this coup. So one can see that Sudan is in that political and economic stress, and then it has been worsened, exacerbated by this military appetite for power. And once one can say you need to have a civilian authority in Sudan. It is the same case that we have in Mali, the same case that we have in Guinea-Conakry.
Now, of course, as you mentioned, the arrests are continuing, the upheaval is continuing. The United Nations and the Western and African countries trying to broker a solution there so that they can return to a civilian-led administration. How do they put more pressure?
Thabo, I want to state very well that Sudan actually has failed. I mean, the United Nations has failed Sudan since 1956. Remember, Sudan has been termed as one of the first countries to get its independence, followed by Ghana. But since 1956, United Nations has failed the Sudanese on the peacekeeping missions. That is a country that went on war between the North and the South. Despite your insight was talking earlier about the South Sudan peace process having gained traction. But if you look going forward, Thabo, I will still say, let's stick to the African narrative. Let's stick to the African template of resolving conflicts. Sudan is a neighbor to Egypt, Ethiopia. There's a need for them to be part of that engagement. The AU has pushed the silencing of guns for a decade. Why are we moving away from that a decade of engaging on peaceful methods rather than relying on military interventions, relying on economic sanctions? Because that's where you can see that the United Nations script, the USA script in many African conflicts, it is all about to pacify the conflict, but at the same time, we still have beneficiaries of this conflict, Thabo, because we are still having armament, weapons coming in and out, harassment of citizens. That's why we are having this crisis in African conflict.
What clout and what standing does the African Union have here, if you're saying they should be the ones dialing up the pressure as opposed to the United States?
The pressure that they put, remember what they did last week, they put Sudan under, they have said that Sudan, because there was a military coup, they will not be allowed on the AU decision-making table. Secondly, they have a power to can insist on Sudan to get into a dialogue. It is the same crisis that we're having in Addis Ababa now, that the AU should not be seen to be issuing media statements, but should be seen having its own, what we call former heads of states have been used in most instances to be mediators. But in some instances, the power of women in that country must be used. Remember just recently, Thabo, we were talking of Resolution 1325, the role of women in conflict resolution. Why are we not looking at even the role of African women to can be brought into this conflict? The AU, Thabo, we know that there are some challenges, but it is important for them to go beyond issuing media statements and not to allow European powers to take the lead of mediation.
African Analyst Advocate Sipho Mantula, appreciate your time and thank you very much for your analysis tonight here on In Focus on the situation, of course, in Sudan, where arrests as we speak are continuing to be effected. A number of professionals now are behind bars, having been detained by the military as the protesters are demanding the complete disillusionment of that agreement reached in 2019, saying that is the only way to restore the country back to a kind of transition that at least would be peaceful and that would make sense to them. We'll continue.